The convenience store. When I was a teenager, I used to spend my summers working at a small convenience store in the middle of nowhere. It was a quiet job, and the most days were uneventful. However, one summer something strange started happening. Every night when I closed up the store, I would hear strange noises coming from the back room. At first, I brushed it off as the building settlings, but the noises persisted. It sounded like someone was moving around back there. But when I went to investigate, there was never anyone there. One night, as I was counting the cash drawer, I heard a voice whispering my name. I whipped around, but no one was there. I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then, things started getting more intense. Items would move around on the shelves by themselves, and I would find things out of place. I started feeling like I was being watched, even when I was alone in the store. One night, as I was closing up, I saw a figure standing in the corner of the store. It was tall and shadowy, and I couldn't see any features. I froze, and the figure just stood there, watching me. After what felt like an eternity, it disappeared into thin air. I quit my job the next day and never looked back. To this day, I don't know what was haunting that store, but I know that I never wanted to experience anything like that again. It was a dark and stormy night, and Sarah was starting her first night shift at the old hospital on the outskirts of town. She had taken the job as a nurse, but she had heard stories about strange occurrences in the hospital at night. As the clock struck midnight, Sarah started to hear strange noises coming from the empty hallways. She tried to shake off the feeling of unease and focused on her tasks, but the noises grew louder and more persistent. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed that the doors to the patient's room were slightly ajar. She cautiously pushed one open and surprised to see a patient lying in the bed, hooked up to machines. But something was off. The patient's eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling, and the machines were beeping erratically. Sarah rushed to the patient and tried to revive him, but it was too late. The patient was dead. Suddenly, Sarah heard footsteps behind her and turned around to see a figure standing in the doorway. The figure was surrounded in darkness, but she could see the glowing eyes staring back at her. Sarah tried to run, but the figure was too fast. It chased her down the hallway, its footsteps echoing through the empty hospital. She tried to hide in a room, but the figure found her and dragged her out into the hallway. As Sarah screamed for help, the figure revealed itself to be a ghostly apparition of a former patient who had died in the hospital years ago. The ghost warned Sarah that she was not alone in the hospital and that she should leave before it was too late. Terrified and alone, Sarah fled the hospital and never went back. But the memory of the night stayed with her forever, a haunting reminder of the dangers that lurk in the darkness of the night shift. About 15 years ago, my father and I went downtown to visit some fountains. He was big into photography. I was running around and playing with a basketball. While he was taking photos, I was playing. I noticed a man walking towards the fountain, and I didn't pay much attention to him at first. I was just running around. And at first I didn't notice, but every time I would get certain distance from my father, he would move closer to me. After a few minutes or so, this happening, I started to notice, and I stayed close to my dad. I said nothing about it, but I kept looking up at the man who never looked away from me. I still remember the look in the man's eyes. It wasn't evil, but focused. I regret not saying anything to my father. I have no idea if I was just another target to him, and I hope he didn't hurt anyone else. This has happened a few years ago when I was around 15. after me and my parents had moved into an old neighborhood in a fairly rural area. Near our house there was a large woods and a lake which all the neighborhood kids swam in during summertime. Tap, tap, tap. I woke up groggily to the sound of 3 taps on my bedroom window. I rolled over and reached for my phone. The time stared back at me, 1:11 a.m. I laid in my bed for a moment before deciding to go back to sleep and ignoring the tapping, as I figured it was probably just the branches from a nearby tree hitting the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I was startled awake again by the same 3 taps, but they were harder this time. I stared at the window curiously for a moment before reading the time of my dimly lit phone once more. 2:22 a.m. Weird, I thought to myself before fixing my gaze back on the window. Tap, tap, tap. 3 more loud taps sounded at my window. I sat up slowly. The tree outside stood perfectly still, no breeze to move the branches. I stood up and walked towards my window slowly, despite every fiber of my body telling me not to go any closer and looking back on it. I wish I had listened to my instinct, because there perched on a tree branch just out of view from where I would have been sat in my bed was the lifeless body of a young girl who I recognized as one of my neighbor's children who had gone missing over a week ago. As I stared in horror at the scene, I noticed a thin string tied to the girl's wrist, and as I stared at it, the string was pulled and the girl's arm raised slowly. When the string was released, her limp hand hitting the glass, the string and her wrist rose and fell 2 more times, creating the familiar tap, tap, tap I had been hearing all night. I bolted into my parents' bedroom in terror and woke them up with tears in my eyes as my mom called the police. My dad came back to my room to look, only to find the girl's body was missing. All that was left was a bloody piece of string hanging from a higher branch and a trail of flattened glass with a blood that glistened in the moonlight from where I assumed the body had been dragged away into a nearby tree line. The police arrived half an hour later and a huge search party began, but they never found the girl's body, and I'm not sure if the girl's family got any answer. Me and my parents moved out of that town few years ago, but the image of the girl is embedded in my memory, and sometimes, I swear, I can still hear the same tap, tap, tap on my window at night. It was just me, Dad, and Mom home. Mom was in the kitchen making dinner, and Dad was in the office doing work. I was playing in the basement along with the odd feeling of being watched, when my mother calls me upstairs for dinner. Suddenly and quietly from behind, someone whispers, "Don't go up there." I turn around and see this middle-aged creepy man smiling right at me. I screamed and ran upstairs telling Mom. She gets Dad and they rush downstairs to find him. The basement hatch was wide open. Dad sprinted up the hatch to the outside, trying to find him. As I peek my head over, I see him running into the forest. 10 minutes later, my dad comes back. He says that he was trailing the dude ready to tackle him, but was too fast and lost him. I was driving home one night after dropping my friends off at home. We stayed out late, and it took me an hour at least to drop them both off. By the time I got into my neighborhood, I noticed a blacked-out car following me. I still had 5 minutes till I got home, and it was pitch dark out. I really thought nothing of it, until he kept following me till I got near to my home. I have never seen this car before, so I stopped on the side to see if he would pass. He did at the end, but stopped maybe 20 feet in front of me. In this moment, I was more alert than worried. I had my gun with me in case of anything. He turned right into the street I was going on and stopped completely. Where I live, all the streets are almost pitch black. There is probably one light for the entire street, and it is very dim. I stopped behind him again, in case maybe I just knew him. I waited for a good 20 seconds and proceeded in front of him. When I did, he started to honk and follow me again. I was already on the street by my home, so I decided to go around a few times. I didn't want him to know where I lived, if he already didn't. After a while, he decided he had enough and left, so I proceeded home. After making it home, I decided to park my car further down my driveway, just in case. I got inside and saw my dog waiting for me. I was glad to see him. I decided to go to bed considering I was gone all day and was tired, had work in the morning. So I fell asleep almost right away. I woke up in the middle of the night, my room all dark. I noticed my door was cracked open, which concerned me because I always keep it shut. I looked around my room and heard a slight laugh in my hallway. Looking back to the door, I noticed a pair of yellow eyes staring at me, which proceeded to say, "He is coming." I jolted out of my sleep, realizing it was just a dream. But I had noticed my window was open and proceeded to hear my closet door creak open. I was on my way home from a late night shift at the hospital when my car broke down on a deserted stretch of road. I was miles away from civilization, and my phone had no signal. I was stranded. As I sat in my car, feeling helpless, I saw an old woman walking down the road towards me. She looked frail and tired. I felt sorry for her. I rolled down my window and asked if she needed help. The woman smiled at me, and I could see that she had only a few teeth left. She said that she lived nearby and offered to let me stay the night at her house while I waited for a tow truck. I was hesitant, but I didn't have any other options. I got out of my car, and the woman led me down a narrow path that led to a small, dilapidated house. The woman's house was old and musty, and I felt uneasy as soon as I stepped inside. The furniture was old and worn, and the walls were covered in faded wallpapers. I noticed that there was no family photos or personal belongings in the house. It was as if the woman lived alone. I was exhausted, and the woman offered me a room to rest in. As I lay in my bed, I could hear strange noises coming from the rest of the house. It sounded like someone was moving around, but when I got up to investigate, there was no one there. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The house felt alive, like it was hiding secrets in its walls. I was scared, but I didn't want to be rude to the old woman who had offered me a place to stay. I decided to brush it off and try to get some sleep. But then I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from outside my room. I jumped out of my bed and ran towards the sound. I found the old woman lying on the floor in a pool of blood, her throat slashed open. I was horrified and ran back to my room to call for help, but my phone was missing. I searched the entire house, but I couldn't find it. I realized that I was trapped in the house with a killer, and I had to find a way to escape. I searched the house again, looking for any clue or weapons that could help me. That's when I found a hidden door in the basement. It led to a secret room, filled with creepy antique dolls and dusty old books. As I searched the room, I found a journal that belongs to the old woman. It contained disturbing entries about her descent into madness, and how she had killed her own family and neighbors to please a demonic entity that she made a deal with. I knew then that I had to get out of the house as fast as possible. I made my way back upstairs, but I was ambushed by the killer. It was the old woman, still alive and wielding a bloody knife. We struggled, but I managed to overpower her and flee the house. I ran as fast as I could, and eventually I stumbled upon a road where a passing car picked me up and took me to safety. The police investigated the old woman's house and found evidence that linked her to several unsolved murders in the area. I was lucky to have escaped with my life, but the memories of the terrifying night have haunted me ever since. Now I have a deep fear of old abandoned houses and the horrors that they may hold.